Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. It is now 2 o'clock, and this is the House Standing Committee on Judiciary and Governmental Operations. At this time, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion to adopt today's agenda, please? There's been a motion. It's been seconded. For all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Today's agenda is adopted. At this time, I'd like to invite anyone in the gallery to provide public comments on the items that are listed on today's agenda. If you have any written comments, I ask that you provide the Sergeant at Arms your written comments, and I will allow 5 minutes for your public comments. But before doing that, Sarge, I'd like to also recognize our legal counsel, Mr. Joe or Attorney Joe Hallahan. Forgive me, counsel. Our LA Cam, our IT Delbert, and our Youth Congress Director, LJ Castro. So with that said, I'd like to... All right, thank you. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. I'm so sorry, everybody. I think I'm moving 5 steps ahead. Seeing that there is enough members to constitute a quorum, I'd like to recognize my vice chair to my left, Rep. Camacho. To his left is Rep. Probst. To his left is BJ Attel. To his left is Rep. Castro. Also recognizing the legal counsel, Counsel Joe. To his right, we have Rep. Sablan. To his right, we have Rep. Camacho. And to Rep. Camacho's right, we have Rep. Omar. So now with this quorum established, I'd like to open the floor for public comments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the House Committee. My name is Juan Pua. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Fire and EMS. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our comments on the above House bill. The bill in itself is noteworthy move and defense finds it that there's need to update the CNMI Fire Code. However, defense wants to submit a comprehensive legislation which address the fire code and other section in the Public Law 18-73. I hope you give us the opportunity so that we will have a unified and uniform language for any amendments affecting defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. If you have a written comment that you'd like to submit to our Sergeant, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the chair and committee. My name is Robert Torres, and I'm here to offer public comments regarding House Bill 23-42. I think right now it's House Substitute 1. And just simply that we're going to have hopefully a continuing discourse and conversation on legislation that affects our citizens and constituents' personal constitutional rights, on balance with the administration of justice in our court system. And we know as a legislative branch that you take this charge seriously in this committee. As we know, our Constitution starts off in Article 1 with the personal individual's rights, built upon the principles of the United States Bill of Rights on the right of the individual and the protection of the individual from an overreaching government, from our experience under British rule. Under those principles, we ask that your committee allow those of us who practice, along with the Attorney General, the administration of criminal justice for appropriate, fair, open, and wide-ranging discussion and what is in the best interest of our community in the administration of criminal justice with this bill. In our prior comments, we submitted legislation discussing the concerns as well as some of the background about the necessity and utility of the role of the grand jury as a check to ensure the proper reviewing of charges for probable cause, as you discussed that in the preliminary hearing, when what the judiciary does. All of this is simply maybe a restart, because we're going to have continuing review of this legislation. And we look forward for the opportunity to provide, again, input. We know that you have a lot of legislation before you. And oftentimes, some of the legislation is a little bit far afield from our normal experience with the criminal justice system. But we know when you affect individuals' rights that you want to make sure that we do it right and balance the need to impose criminal justice and ensure due process with the enforcement of our laws and the protection of our citizens. No one will quarrel with our citizens' rights to be safe in our homes, but at the same time, no one will quarrel to make sure that the government and law enforcement do not overreach in their enforcement of those laws. That is our role, that is our task. And when I say our, it means those of us who live here, the elected officials, the executive branch and the judiciary, and those who practice law to represent our citizens, including the public defender and those of us who practice criminal defense. The Attorney General's role is no different, and we respect their role and their duty to uphold the rule of law and the proper enforcement. But it is not a one-way street, and it is a two-way street that allows for that robust discussion. And while we may have differences of opinion, what matters is how our citizens' rights are protected. And in closing, I would just simply suggest to the committee that in addition to law enforcement, there are also various pieces of legislation throughout the states, in addition to the grand jury provision, which I encourage you to look at and consider introducing and on par with this legislation, the role of the grand jury. But at the same time, in other areas that affect our citizens to protect their rights, including expungement provisions. When you have a citizen who had a first-time offender, a mistake, if you will, in their history, but they have been clean in the past years, why is it not appropriate that they have rehabilitated themselves to introduce legislation for expungement? Simple example, as a public defender over 20 years ago, I had a defendant who had a littering conviction from 1976, and we wanted to ask to see if we could get that expunged. This is 1999, and he couldn't. And it just is a black mark on our record. That's a good idea for our citizens who have rehabilitated themselves. So the committee, I know, will look far and wide for legislation that fits and works for our citizens. And for 2342, we look forward for further opportunity in the recent draft that I understand will be coming up. And we ask that you respectfully consider our comments and hope that we can fashion legislation that can move forward for our citizens. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Torres. Much appreciated. At this time, I'd like to call Rep. TJ Maglonia to please join us in the front. We are your colleagues. Is there anyone else in the gallery that'd like to make a public comment? The comment portion of this agenda is still open.
Hello. Sorry, I'm running late. We had a very busy day at clinic. My name is Lauren Cabrera. I am from Saipan Humane Society, the sole operational animal health clinic in the CNMI. and I'm here to state my support for House Bill 2383. I bring a unique perspective here because I am a master's prepared nurse practitioner in human medicine, and I'm also pursuing a master's degree in veterinary clinical care. I'm also set to undertake the master's in veterinary professional associate, which this bill addresses. There is no practicing veterinarian living in the CNMI, and there are a lot of pets, lots of stray dogs, but many pet owners who are in need of care. And our clinic, although we only started last year around May seeing patients, saw over 3,000 pets, and we expect to see over 6,000 pets this year. It is very clear to us that people of the CNMI care deeply for their pets. However, across the country, there is a critical veterinary shortage. There are only 3,200 veterinary students graduating in the US annually. Most of them have insurmountable student loan debts hovering around $200,000 or more. With a projected 41,000 additional veterinarians needed to meet the needs of our country by 2030, the United States is expected to have a huge shortage, more than we do already. Our community simply cannot support the cost of a veterinarian and traditional veterinary clinic, not now and definitely not in the future when it's even harder to find veterinarians. In short, it will be even more difficult to recruit a full-time vet here. However, there are other options, and that's what this bill is about. Where it's not feasible to recruit a full-time veterinarian, it is crucial that we open up and enhance pathways where veterinary care can be accessible to the community. Formally recognizing and leveraging licensed veterinary technicians, who are the nurses of the veterinary field, and welcoming the emerging veterinary professional associate role, which is equivalent to a human nurse practitioner or physician assistant, will bring huge potential for more consistent, high-level services in the community. Despite our lack of a practicing resident veterinarian, our clinic still saves so many lives, and we could save so many more with more training. For context, our clinic handles about 500 patients a month. We're operated by a team of 4 non-veterinary staff, and we're supervised by veterinarians who live off island. Our innovative setup with the veterinarian off-island mentoring us has saved numerous lives and provided critical preventive care to thousands of pets. Our hard work has also made crucial spay-neuter services possible, which is essential for minimizing the stray population, which is a huge public health concern. Passing this bill will expand our ability to provide more desperately needed services to our community and ensure that we'll be able to do it in a sustainable way for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lauren. If you have that in a hard copy form and you're willing to share your public comments, please do so. Thank you so much. The gallery is still open for public comments. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Flores, members of the JGO. My name is Robbie Glass. I'm the Chief Solicitor here in the CNMI. I'm here to comment on, I believe, 3 of the bills that are up for today. The first one, we heard a little bit about the Fire Safety Code and adopting the International Fire Code. I just want to note that the Office of the Attorney General did provide written comments for that, so you should have those. The only thing that we really had to note for it was there was a reference to the 2018 version of the fire code, and I believe the 2021 is the most recent. They update it. It's in there, so if I say this wrong, I apologize. But I think they update it every 2 or 4 years. Every 3 years. Thanks, TJ. Appreciate that. So every 3 years, and so obviously this being 2024, if the last one was in 2021, they're probably going to update it again this year. So that's just something to maybe note for you guys, that you might want to update that language to start with the 2021 code as opposed to the 2018 for that. The second one is House Bill 2383, which is for the Secretary of DLNR to do vet licenses. Again, the Office of the Attorney General did provide written comments on here. The only real thing of note here is that there is a position already created to do veterinary licensing. And this bill would seem to move that power over into the Secretary of DLNR to be able to very clearly use that power instead of it just being the chief of animal health and industry. But we do have pathways currently for licensing. It just seems to not really be utilized at this time because I don't think that position either is not in existence or it's not funded or it's not there. And so that's what's kind of created the shortfall. But we are in support of making sure that we do have veterinary licenses. On that note, I also represent the Healthcare Professions Licensing Board, and they would like to express their support for keeping the veterinary licenses under DLNR. There was some talk, I know, of putting that under the Healthcare Professions Licensing Board. They had some discussion because of a letter that came in, but they are in support of that staying with DLNR because the professions on the Healthcare Professions Licensing Board do not have any experience in veterinary care. They don't deal with animals. There's no one on the board that deals with animals. There's no one with that background. That would be more proper in DLNR, which does have at least some access and does have some involvement with animals, at least, specifically fish and wildlife. They obviously have animal quarantines under them. So it would make sense to leave that over there. So they are in support of that. And then finally, House Bill 2342, which is the preliminary hearing bill. Our office, again, we provided written comments for this. We are in support of this bill. It does something that really needs to be done, which is defines when an individual gets a preliminary hearing. Now, again, I'll reiterate, a preliminary hearing is not constitutionally required. Our CNMI Supreme Court has said that. The Commonwealth versus Babauta case, I believe it's either 1 or 4 NMI, but it's there and I can certainly provide that. But they were very clear that it's not a constitutional requirement to have a preliminary hearing. It is something that is created by rule or statute. And we have the statute. Again, this is something you guys are looking at updating. And then there's also a criminal rule for it. I would note, too, that the Criminal Rules Committee is set to meet next week. And I imagine that is going to be something that will be addressed with that committee as well. But that doesn't mean that this body should not look at passing this statute too, because this is already a statute in place. And the statute and the law will harmonize each other and they will work together to create a very good system for preliminary hearing. Notice I'm not getting up here saying there should be no preliminary hearings. There are instances where there should be preliminary hearings when an individual is substantially deprived of their liberty. And that definition is in this statute. That is one of the things that's happening, and we support that definition. We think that'll be a step in the right direction as it balances correctly the rights of not only the defendant, but it also is fair for the prosecution as well. And so we thank you for that. We thank you for taking the time to look at that, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Glass. If you do have a written copy of your public comment, please furnish one. If not,
I think we already gave them to you guys.
thank you so much. The gallery is still open for public comments.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores, members of the committee. My name is Douglas Hardig. I'm the public defender for the CNMI. I have a question because there's some confusion on my behalf with an email exchange that I had with the office of Representative Flores. My understanding is we've moved on as to House Bill 2342 to HS2.
No, we haven't, sir. And before we continue this conversation, I'd like to take a short recess. Thank you. Thank you. We apologize for that short recess. Attorney Harding, you have the floor.
My comments then are as to HS 1, which I thought would be moot, as I thought that there was a supplemental that would negate a lot of what I had to say. But I would start off by saying, in theory, if HS 1 were to pass, it would make my life easier, because the fewer the rights people have, the less I have to do to protect them. But we're not here, and I'm not here to talk about making my life easier or the life of the Attorney General easier. We're here to talk about a constitutional affirmity and fairness. And I would point out, as I did in my letter, some specifics, whereas the subsection C in particular, there's discussion of no right to discovery, which doesn't really define discovery. So let me just briefly explain something right now. This is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Discovery is the process where different parties, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case, have to disclose certain information to each other. So, for example, in a criminal case, the prosecutor would have to disclose to the defendant exhibits that they're going to use at trial, like lab results or photographs, statements that they took from the defendant, maybe statements that they took from other witnesses. Defense would have to disclose statements from witnesses they intend to use at trial. That's the discovery process. There is no discovery at preliminary hearings. That's a fallacy. One of the cases that's cited in the preamble talks about how the rogue courts have allowed discovery. That's absolutely not true. What has happened is when a witness testifies. So let's take the example, because at a preliminary hearing, remember, we're not talking about lay witnesses or people who actually know about the crime, have seen the crime. Typically, if there's a preliminary hearing, the only witness there is a police officer who gathered reports. He's not really a firsthand witness. So a police officer is on the witness stand testifying, and he says, the question is, when he answers, the victim was robbed by the defendant. And the question is, how do you know? You weren't there, so how do you know? And the police officer, let's call him officer number 1, he says, because officer number 2 told me. Okay, how does officer 2 know? Because officer number 2 read officer number 3's report. Then the question is, can I see that report? Can the judge see that report? Let's make sure, let the judge understand that what's in officer reports number 3, which officer number 2 depended on, which officer number 2 told officer number 1 about, let's see if that actually says the defendant is the one who was seen doing the robbery. Let's compare the testimony to that first report. Maybe you look at that first report and you say, right then and there, you know what? This is not the same person. The report says it was Juan, and the defendant's name is Joseph. It's the wrong guy. That's what the Attorney General is trying to stop. They're not trying to say you have to go out and gather evidence and turn it over to the other party. You have to get your photographs developed. You have to get the DNA results before the preliminary hearing. None of that stuff. What they're talking about is where a report that already exists, that the witness himself has read, that the witness himself probably has in his possession right there in the room. Can we see that report? And the answer the Attorney General wants you to have is no. The judge cannot see that. That's the small amount of discovery that's currently allowed. The case law clearly says open discovery, which is Rule 16, Rule 23, does not apply in a preliminary hearing. It's only this limited access to things that are testified about. That's the only time that you get any kind of discovery. And that's what subsection C is trying to eliminate. So that's a problem. That is basically tying the judge's hands. You need to let judges be judges. Let them decide what's going on. It also says they can't decide the credibility of a witness or the facts. Can't decide the credibility of a witness or the facts. So when the police officer says, I was told that the defendant is the one who was seen doing the robbery, the judge cannot decide if that's true. Because how does he know if the police officer is lying? That's exactly what the judge is supposed to do, decide the credibility of the witness. And they're trying to stop that. The judge just has to accept that it's true, but he can't accept it's true if he can't decide that it's true. And it works the other way, of course. He can also should be able to decide what he's being told is nonsensical. And I'm not going to hold someone in prison based on a ridiculous statement that was repeated to the police, and quite possibly the police don't even believe it. I'm not going to hold someone for that, but I am going to decide when I hear a statement which makes sense given to me by law enforcement that that is true. But this would just, if you can't decide credibility, that means you can't decide who's telling the truth and you can't decide who's not telling the truth. So how can you have a hearing of any kind where the judge has been told you can't decide credibility? And I also would disagree with the Attorney General that there's no requirement for a preliminary hearing. There's no requirement for a preliminary hearing in most states under many circumstances and in the federal government because there's a grand jury. This is our substitute. This is what we do. We don't require a grand jury. Why? Because we have this instead. And so to say there's no requirement and just blanketly ignore it and let's just not have a preliminary hearing is really does present constitutional problems. And I think that you should consider the implications by eliminating or basically hog-tying the ability of people to get a fair and open preliminary hearing. But again, those are just a couple of the major points where you're taking away the judge's ability to be a judge. Now the judge is just a rubber stamp. And to say there's no, to eliminate discovery when it's clear through case law and through the rules, there is no open discovery. But as part of the right to confrontation, that's a constitutionally protected right. The right to be able to do an effective job, which is what confrontation would mean, when asking questions of a witness who's being presented by the other side, you should be able to ask them when they say, I'm relying my testimony, my statement, everything I have to say is based on a report which I read or someone else read to me. You should be able to say, well, if everything you're saying is based on a report that you read, why can't we read the same report and just make sure that it's the same and let the judge read that report? And so those are just two of the major problems with this revised version. And again, I would refer you for more comments to my written letter of July 14th, which I can resupply or send out a copy if you don't already have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Harding. The floor is still open for discussion. Being that there's none, public comments of this agenda is now closed. Short recess, please. Now that we're back in session, I apologize for that short recess. Can I look to my vice chair to make the motion, please? Can I get a motion to open to a committee as a whole? Another short recess. Back on air, we're back from recess. This has to be one of the very interesting committees. Right now, we are back at old business. I'd like to recognize the vice chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And under old business, we have item A, which is House Bill 2342, House Substitute 1. And just to provide a little brief legislative background, the committee did meet last year on June 5th, and we have adopted the House Substitute 1 version. And I believe that you've worked on a new forthcoming amendment, so I would like to introduce that amendment to introduce House Bill 2342, House Substitute 1, House Draft 1. So move.
Second. There's been a motion to accept the House Draft 1D1, HS1D1. Discussion.
Madam Chair,
Recognize JP, Rep. Sablan.
the substitute offered by the vice, was it distributed to the members for review?
At this time, I know I mentioned the Cam. Cam, can you put a House substitute
And if
on
we can
the,
have the vice chair kind of explain the difference between House Substitute 1 and the House Draft.
well, because this is my bill, I'd like to clarify what the changes are.
Thank you.
However,
Thank you.
Cam, can you break it out, please? There's no HD1. HS2. Now, this bill, obviously, what we're asking, what the AG and what the PD office had commented on was the initial House Bill 2342 HS1, which this committee approved last year in 2023. If you look at the last bill, a bill for an act to establish consistent procedures for a preliminary hearing in a criminal case, that was 2342 HS1, which we passed back in 2023. My substitute to the substitute that you have in your custody now says to clarify procedures for a preliminary hearing. Such amendments are again clarified on page 2. However, what I'm asking this committee to do is, number one, accept this substitute, and we can go back and get further comments from the AG and PD and establish a new draft for this submission. Any other discussion?
Point of clarification, Madam Chairwoman, I'm not getting, is this before us on the screen, the draft 2, the House Substitute 2?
Yes, which
So
I would
what-
be proposing.
So, which is the motion by the vice. So one, the title was changed. That's the first one. Did you mention page 2? What was changed on page 2?
Okay, so in page 2, line 15, section 2 of the amendment, there's a strikeout on subsection 6303, which says pretrial. Now it says preliminary hearing procedure. And mind you, gentlemen, and this committee, we did reject the criminal procedure offered by the Supreme Court So, as mentioned with Attorney Glass from the AAG office, it is crucial that, for the first time they've ever been invited to sit in a judicial council. And mind you, I had asked many times to sit on the judicial council to look through the certain criminal procedures that we were talking about. This will now address that. And I do understand that the PD will also have their sentiments and disagree with the AG, and that's okay. That's part of their job. This bill now narrows the changes. We've taken into part a lot of what the PD had mentioned, and we've also established and taken into part of what the AG had mentioned. But the most important thing is that we rejected the criminal rules of procedure. And just as the AG suggested, is that the procedure usually comes first, then the law. We need to do this first so that the procedure is correct. So I'm asking that we accept the amendment on HS1 to be now HS2 House Draft 1 for further comments. Can I get a motion? Is there any more discussion regarding this bill? Recognized vice.
I believe we're still under the motion to adopt, to address Chairman Sablan's question. The title was just changed, but before you up at the screen, that covers the HD one. So we just kind of reformatted the title. So right now we're still under to adopt the changes. And I will be moving forward that we hold the bill back in committee for further review and for further comments. So if we can just dispose of the amendment, the motion to.
Just for
eliminate it.
clarification, because on section 2, which is subsection 6303, other than the word pretrial was striked out and preliminary hearing procedure was included. Also under A, subsection 6308, a lot of those provisions were changed versus House Substitute 1, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And that goes all the way to section, Cam, can you go down? Because you're at A. Is section B also changed?
Correct.
As well as section C.
You have HS1.
It's on the screen. We don't have hard copies. There's no hard copies.
Subsection.
Yes, I believe that the subsection C remains the same.
Correct.
Yes. As well as the subsections below them, right? Consult? D is, right. Okay. Okay, so clarified. I guess only subsection C was not changed.
Correct, JP. Rep. Sablan.
So clarified.
Can I recognize counsel?
Yeah, so after subsection C, some things did change, and but for section what used to be E, they just renumbered the section. So subsection E is now subsection F. So just to fully answer your question.
So clarified. Ready?
Recognize Rep. Camacho.
Was House Substitute 1 disseminated to the committee?
Yes.
I don't have it.
It was disseminated via email. You got, and it's also on the server.
And since we're under discussion, Madam Chair, that the motion offered by the Vice was to vote on the substitute two, which will turn into substitute two, and that were further clear that after voting on this by the committee, that we will reach out to all stakeholders to make public comments on the substitute two. So clarified. Thank you.
Yes, Rep. Sablan, that is correct. So I would like to recognize the vice chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, there's a motion before us right now, which is in the form of House Substitute 1, House Draft 1, which is the motion that I put forth earlier. So we're still on that. We need to dispose of that.
Okay, Vice, can you just read your motion just to clarify again for the body? Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Omar. I motion that we adopt a new amendment to change House Bill 2342, House Substitute 1, in a new form of House Bill 2342, House Substitute 1, House Draft 1. So move.
Second.
So
There's been a motion. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I'm sorry, discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that we are back on the main motion, I hereby move that we table House Bill 2342, House Substitute 1, House Draft 1 for further comments and for further review by the committee. So move.
There's been a motion on the table. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is House Bill 2371. Discussion. At this time, I'd like to recognize the author of the bill, Rep. Angelo Camacho.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So basically, House Bill 2371, I'm just going to read the title. To provide disclosure requirements upon transfer of ownership of a vehicle rebuilt from salvage. So kind of just to summarize this bill, as we all know, currently we don't have a system that requires automotive dealerships to provide, if I may, it's a Carfax, or basically a vehicle history. So this bill would actually mandate and require those businesses to provide these information, much needed information for consumers. And I believe it also has a section where if they fail to do so, there'll be a penalty involved. So I think it's just, fair for consumers to, explore their options. Yes, that's pretty much what the bill is about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho, for being in attendance to justify and support your bill. Are there any more discussions on this bill?
Ready.
Recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did discuss with the author that he would like some changes, which were recommended by the Department of Commerce, the Secretary of the Department of Commerce. Some minor changes. If I may, if you can flip to page 4. And these are recommended by the Department of Commerce. So line 7, after the word damage, to strike out the words or theft. And then on line 11, to strike out the word retail after the word vehicles. And then on line 19, to strike out the word retail after the word section the. And I hereby propose an amendment to read as House Bill 2371, House Draft 1, which includes these amendments that were just discussed. So move.
There's been a motion offered. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Main motion.
Back to the main motion. Recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues. And now back on the main motion to adopt a committee report for passage for House Bill 2371, House Draft 1. So move.
There's been a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now moving on to item number 5, new business. House Bill 2382 to amend the Fire Safety Code to apply the International Fire Code guiding standard in the Commonwealth. I'd like to recognize Rep. TJ Atto, who is the author, Rep. TJ Maglonia, who is the author of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, as you mentioned, House Bill 23-82 to amend the Fire Safety Code to apply the International Fire Code guiding standard in the Commonwealth. Again, with the legislation to establish the Department of Fire and Emergency Medical Services, they are currently bound to the 2012 Fire Code regulations, which is causing somewhat of a conflict with DPW, which has already amended their building code, and basically this legislation looks to address that, amend that, and also give the authority to the fire commissioner to amend the fire code as they see fit as time goes on, so that way we don't have to keep coming back to amend it via legislation. So I know that there was a little concern brought up by the AG, and I think legal might have a little amendment that they may be working on, but I know that's to address the current language that states the 2018 edition, and I know currently we're in 2021. I think it's a little. I think, in my personal opinion, I think the language on page 19 that states the commissioner may adopt as appropriated for the Commonwealth other national codes and standards kind of addresses that, but I would leave that up for the committee to decide on how they would like to act moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Maglonia. Will you be offering any amendments to the bill today?
I'd like to, yes.
Okay. Short recess, please. Okay. We are still under discussion and we are back from recess. Can I recognize the vice chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And during our recess, we briefly went over some changes that were added into the original bill. So I would like to move that we adopt or
All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now back to the main motion. Recognize vice chair.
thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we adopt a committee report for passage for House Bill 2382, House Draft 1. So move.
There's been a motion and it's been seconded for House Draft 2382 to begin its way to the committee for its committee report to be furnished for the committee signature. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now, this brings us down to House Bill 2383 to authorize the Secretary of the Department of Lands and Natural Resources to approve licensed veterinarians. I'd like to recognize the author of the bill, Rep. Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. I appreciate all of you for looking into this bill. As we've previously discussed it, this is a much needed bill to update some things in our current legislation as it refers to existing titles. For example, we no longer have a chief. We, of course, have a secretary at the DLNR. This bill goes a lot further than that. We've heard earlier testimony. Besides the secretary with the authorization to have a licensed veterinarian to supervise directly or indirectly qualified veterinary technicians, veterinary professional associates, and also foreign licensed veterinarians. And one of the reasons why this is so important right now is that we don't have a fully licensed veterinarian operating in the CNMI right now. In fact, although we do have nonprofits and everything here, and we appreciate and applaud each and every one of them, the Saipan Humane Society has been working hand in hand with the mayor's office, the dog control program. In fact, they work right there at the dog shelter. And if you've ever brought your animals there, they have been providing much needed care and support, and have saved many animals from certain death through their treatment, humane assistance. And we're most grateful to them. But unfortunately, right now, again, we do not have a veterinarian. There's great support for this and much need for this bill. And if permitted, Madam Chair and colleagues, I would like to invite, if possible, Lauren Cabrera to be a part of this discussion to help answer questions should the need arise. Thank you.
If there is no problem with the rest of the committee, and I can get a motion for that to engage with Ms. Lauren, I'd like to get a motion for that, please.
Madam Chair, motion to break into committee of the whole. So move.
There's been a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Ms. Lauren, please proceed to the gallery. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Lauren, for your testimony. And now the floor is open for any members who have discussion or for questions and answer to Ms. Lauren. This is the time to do so. Thank you so much. Recognize Rep. Castro.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just wanted to bring up that, there are a lot of farmers and ranchers out there that are also in need of access to veterinary services. So I think this bill, as it intends to build capacity within the Department of Lands and Natural Resources is in the best interest of our people as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep Castro. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment or ask Ms. Lauren for a question? Recognize Rep Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out the fact that earlier in public comments, we did hear from the Chief Solicitor from the Attorney General's office, Mr. Robbie Glass, and he did express that they are in support that this bill does stay with the Department of Lands and Natural Resources for all the right reasons, and that even the Board of Licensing had stated that they would prefer it stay there. I was very happy to hear that today, and I just wanted to mention that in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep Probst. We are still in committee as a whole. Any other discussion or any other questions to ask Ms. Lauren? If none, can I get a motion to go back into recognize Vice Chair?
Motion to get back into a committee meeting. So move.
There's a motion to go back into committee meeting. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We're back at the main motion. Recognize Manny Castro. Rep Castro, my apologies.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'd like to introduce a motion to adopt House Bill or adopt a committee report to approve for the passage of House Bill 23-83 to authorize the Secretary of the Department of Lands and Natural Resources to approve licensed veterinarians.
There's been a motion to approve 2383 and for the LAs to furnish its committee report. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now moving along to Senate Bill 2316. Members, just so that you are aware, I did invite Senator Karina Magofnia to come and support and give us more insight on her bill, which was introduced back in June of 2023. I know that there's a scheduled meeting with the Senate Fiscal Committee meeting happening at the same time. I do remember, though, that there was some discussion in regard to Senate Bill 2316, page 2, line 19. And I just like to point out that it was the Consumer Price Index of the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I believe at this time we did ask her to furnish more data, but that now that she obviously is conflicted and cannot attend, I'd like to have some more discussion on this. Can I recognize Rep Castro to please engage conversation with me? Looking at the last committee hearing that we had in June, you did make a comment about the price index in which she is addressing in this. Thank you. Rep Castro.
Thank you, Rep Marissa. Although the intent of this bill is good, the intent is good. However, I'm just concerned that it might cause more harm, given that it's a price freeze. So, and then it also references more the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that's the Consumer Price Index at the national level, when we really should be looking at our data from our Department of Commerce Vital Statistics Office that represents a better sample size, and it might not address the situation that we're actually trying to address here. So my only recommendation is that we use that data if we're going to make any movement with this bill. Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a comment in regard to the bill? Council, can I recognize you just for a short? I'm going to ask the question. So the question I got coming in from the public is some of them, there's obviously a divide. Some support the bill, some don't. What comments I'm receiving is that they believe this bill will help uh, put us in a better situation. Can I get your comment in terms of the legal aspect of that? If we act on this bill using what Senator Karina has imposed as far as language, which is the Consumer Price Index of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. How does that affect us, being that we're so remote and we depend so much on import? What is the detriment to this?
Right. So first, I think I would echo Representative Castro's comment, saying that the consumer price index in this bill isn't specifically identified. There's multiple consumer price indexes released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that if we were to use a consumer price index that wasn't reflective of what it is on island, then this cap on price may either be too high or too low. It wouldn't be accurate as to what this bill is trying to do.
Thank you, Council. Joe, I appreciate that. With that being said, members, can I get a motion to table Senate Bill 2316?
So move.
There's been a motion on the floor to table 2316. This committee will, and it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. With that being said, I will reach out to Senator Karina to see if she's willing to offer any more amendments and provide more input to her bill. I'd like to ask the Vice Chair. Vice Chair, during this engagement in the committee meeting, House Bill 2371, did you do a motion for the LAs to accept the amendments and then prepare the committee report, or just to accept the amendments on 2371? Both. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's clarified so that, Cam, please prepare the committee report for 2371. Moving on to item number 6, miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous items to be addressed? Being that there's none, can I get a motion to adjourn? There's a motion to adjourn. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.